The Siege of Ragusa was fought between Austrian Croat troops allied with the British Royal Navy under Captain William Hoste against a French garrison under Joseph de Montrichard between 19 and 27 January 1814 during the Adriatic campaign of the Napoleonic Wars. The siege was fought on the coast of the Adriatic Sea for possession of the strategically important fortified town of Ragusa. Background: in 1806, the Republic of Ragusa surrendered to forces of the Empire of France to end a months-long siege by the Russian fleets. The French lifted the siege and subsequently entered Ragusa in 1806. In 1808, Napoleon ordered Marshal Marmont to abolish the Republic of Ragusa and amalgamate its territory into the French Empire's client state, the Napoleonic Kingdom of Italy. Marmont himself became the Duke of Ragusa, and in 1810 Ragusa, with all Dalmatia, went to the newly created French Illyrian provinces. Austria declared war on France in August 1813, and by the autumn the Royal Navy enjoyed unopposed domination over the Adriatic Sea, working in conjunction with the Austrian armies now invading the Illyrian provinces and northern Italy. Rear Admiral Thomas Fremantle's ships were able to rapidly transport British and Austrian troops from one point to another, forcing the surrender of the strategic ports one after another. December, Captain William Hoste with his ship HMS Bacanti had already captured the mountain fortress of Kota with the help of Montenegrin forces in early January. After this victory, Hoste, along with HMS Saracen, an 18-gun brig, immediately sailed to Ragusa, which was under a dubious blockade by Austrian forces under General Todor Milutinovic. Milutinovic's forces were not just dealing with the French but had to endure discontent with a number of Ragusan rebels with his force and trying to keep them under control. The French under command of Joseph de Montrichard had less than 600 men left in the entire region after losing over a third of his men who had defected since the war with Austria began. Siege. When Bacanti arrived at Ragusa on the 19th of January, Hoste landed and visited Milutinovic to see the situation. He had with him 2 Croat battalions of 400 men, but they were without artillery, so Hoste improvised. On the morning of the 22nd, Hoste immediately went into action, and 4 mortars and 2 guns were landed and opened fire on San Lorenzo Fort and the defenses of the town. The French answered with a heavy fire from all batteries, and Hoste soon knew that Ragusa would not be easy to take. Hoping to use the same successful tactics that won him Kota, Hoste set about the task of seeking strategic positions. He soon eyed the forts and positions on the hill of Srd overlooking the town and the nearby Lokrum Island east of the town. By taking these, he knew Ragusa would not last long under siege from these positions, and Milutinovic agreed with him to secure the approaches to the town. On the 24th of January, a third of Bacan's crew under Lieutenant Milborne and his men managed to bring 2 18-pounders round the Srd hill at the back of Ragusa, a distance of some 6 miles. They soon bombarded the small French garrison on Lokrum. Royal Marines landed and then took the island after a small fight which yielded 11 guns. On the road to Brigade, the Royal Marines cut off the French water supply and also took the monastery of St. Jacob east of the city. At the same time, Hoste asked Milutinovic to attack the imperial fortress on top of the hill of Srd. Milutinovic agreed as long as Hoste supported him with artillery fire. This was agreed, and by the end of the day, and despite some loss, the Croats were on top of Srd, forcing the 70 French gunners either to surrender or flee, and this yielded up 21 guns. Hoste then ordered artillery artillery to be ferried ashore and from the northern part of Gruz then taken up to the slopes of Srd. Hoste, who had refused to yield cannons to the Ragusans on earlier occasions, did so now by supplying Milutinovic with one large and two smaller cannons, and permitted them to stand by the batteries under British command. Now the full complement of the siege guns were brought to bear: 2 mortars, 2 16-pounders, and 6 18-pounders, as well as the guns on Bacantí and Saracen, and the captured French guns both on top of Srd and on Logram Island. Hoste ordered the bombardment, which continued over the next day without ceasing. He targeted the main towers of the Ragusa fortress, the Minster Tower, Fort Bocar, and the Revelin fortress. Then on the second day, being the 26th, the Royal Navy ships opened up bombardment from the sea, concentrating the fire on the Port Street John fortress. This was all too much for Montrichard, despite being cut off for 4 months, losing many of his troops through defection, suffering a revolt in the surrounding region 3 months earlier, and only recently riots inside the town had begun to flare up. He decided the only option was to surrender. He sent out a truce on the morning of the 27th and to request the British batteries to cease fire. Hoste agreed, and the Siege of Ragusa had ended. Aftermath. On the 27th of January, the French capitulation was signed in Gruz and ratified the same day. After almost 8 years of occupation, the French troops marched out of Dubrovnik. 138 guns and 500 men were taken. On the afternoon of the 28th of January 1814, the Austrian troops and 100 British Marines made their way into the city through the pile gates, denying admission to the Ragusa rebels. British losses were no more than 1 killed and 10 wounded. The Austrians had suffered a little more, with around 30 casualties, with most of these coming from the assault on Fort Imperial on Srd Hill. There were reinforcements of British troops of the 35th Regiment of Foot from HMS Elizabeth, which had arrived with Edward Leveson Gower on the 29th, but he declined to take part in the negotiations, seeing that Hoste had everything under control. A rebel Ragusan flag of St. Blaise was flown alongside the Austrian and British colours, but only for 2 days, because, on the 30th of January, General Milutinovic ordered the mayor to lower it. Subsequent events proved that Austria took every possible opportunity to take over the entire coast of the eastern Adriatic, from Venice to Kota. The Allies did everything in their power to eliminate the Ragusa issue at the subsequent Vienna Congress of 1815. The Ragusa representative, Miho Bona, was denied participation in the Congress, while the pro-Austrian Milutinovic, prior to the final agreement of the Allies, assumed complete control of the city. At the Congress of Vienna in 1815, Ragusa was made a part of the crown land of the Kingdom of Dalmatia, ruled by Austria-Hungary, which it remained a part of until 1918. After the surrender, Bacanta took a detachment of the 35th Foot to Trieste, and on the 22nd of March, she went to the town of Parga on the coast of Greece, after the inhabitants had requested assistance against the French garrison of 170 men, commanded by Colonel. The French flag was hauled down as soon as the frigate arrived, and Hoste took possession of the town.